Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahi rahmani rahim. Man in his creation has been created in the best of forms. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created man in a perfect form. But due to certain issues to do with the environment, the form of man has changed, leading to situations whereby man has been born with disability, or man has been forced to assume a status of disability. Tonight, to discuss the issue of Muslims living with disability, we are honored to have in our program Brother Harun Muhammad Harun Ma'alim Hassan. Brother Harun Ma'alim Hassan is a Muslim living with disability and also the chairperson of NONDO, that is Northern Nomadic Disability Organization, and also he is an author by design. Brother Harun, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Brother Harun, most of the people, whenever they're talking about persons living with disability, they think about persons who have a certain form. And here you are today, you are a person with disability, yet if we look at you from face value, we do not see that face of disability. What should people expect when they talk about a person with disability?
Thank you so much, Brother Salim, for giving me the opportunity. I think first we have to define disability in many contexts. Disability, or it, by virtue of its definition, people give it three kind of an approach. Disability mostly is about someone with an impairment. Whether the impairments are very visible like mine, or whether they are invisible like mental health and psychosocial form of disability. Disability in the contemporary context is about this person with impairment and the barriers across this person with an impairment. Mm-hmm. And the barriers comes in twofold. Mm-hmm. One is environmental barrier, and the other one is attitudinal barrier. Mm-hmm. So it is about this person with an impairment and what is our attitude toward this person with an impairment. Uh-huh. Or what sort of barriers every day does he encounter to participate meaningfully in the society. Mm-hmm. The barrier, built environment, the way roads are organized, homes are built, offices are built, mosques are built, you know? Like even now coming up here was a bit tough for me. Yeah. People have to carry me up. That is now a barrier. So disability, as long as man was created by God, disability have been there. And it will continue to be there. And it is increasing in numbers, by the way.
Well, society in its wisdom has thought that maybe it is important for persons who are living with disability to have certain laws in place that is going to guide how they're going to live and how the rest of society is going to engage with them. What are the risks that are inherent in the absence of this kind of laws? You know, why should disabled people be protected by law?
Thank you so much. Salim, everybody need to be protected by law. All of us. The state must protect us. And the state must create also laws that enable us to be productive and meaningful in our society. If we come to the context of Kenya, for example, we have laws, great laws again. We have Persons with Disabilities Act 2003, signed by the former president, Kibaki. Yeah. President Kibaki, when he signed that law, he was in a wheelchair. You remember 2002, he was involved in a road accident. Yes. But before then, there were people with disability, and they were struggling how the issues have to be institutionalized in the state affairs. But maybe that particular wheelchair the president maybe enjoyed was an opportunity for millions of Kenyans with disabilities now to push the president to sign a law, which came into our force. Unfortunately, that piece of law to date, it's not aligned with the current constitution. And then Kenya in 2007-8, they ratified and domesticated Convention on the Right of Person with Disability, international obligation, where now every 4 years they have to now do a report to UN Committee on the Right of Person with Disability in Geneva on what they are actually doing or the status of implementation of that law. So we have great laws. If you look at the Constitution of Kenya, for example, Article 54 in the Bill of Rights spelled out in a bigger way how issues to do with disability can be handled in this country. But, of course, laws are one thing.
Well, you've mentioned the Persons Living with Disability Act 2003 that was signed into law by former President Mwai Kibaki. If we look critically at this piece of legislation, do you think that it meets the needs of disabled persons in Kenya? And if it does not meet the needs, what are the challenges that you are faced with as regards this piece of legislation?
Well, that piece of law, that particular time was hurried. It had many loopholes. But nonetheless, it was good because previously there are no laws even to recognize issue of disability as a right. Addressing those barriers I told you earlier about whether it is physical or attitudinal. But the challenge is, did that law conform with the current constitution? Not yet. Yet, because that piece of law was under the previous constitution. So in the current constitution, it has not been harmonized with it, and so it has so many loopholes, especially how it handles issues to do with disability. And then the other important thing is, as I've said a bit earlier, we have Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability. And then we have the current constitution. Now, there is no policy yet in this country to operationalize these laws. Since 2006, it is still a draft. It is somewhere. I participated in one time, it is drafting. So we don't know where the problem really is. So there's no policy yet, to operationalize all these law. And what does that mean? It means it's still issues to do with disability. We handle it from perspective of charity, from perspective of sadaka, pity, things like that. Not from the right approach.
Have there been any deliberate efforts from people in your sector to make sure that the law, which has a lot of loopholes, actually is made to be in consonance with the Constitution and also in consonance with the United Nations laws that conventions that we could have signed as a country?
Yeah, there are a lot of efforts. Even government are doing something. Disabled persons organization in their own right, they're doing some things. So there are many sectors. Actually, we are very much different from many years. And slowly by slowly, we must also really appreciate this as Kenya's way ahead in many African countries, in terms of issues to do with disabilities. So I think the biggest problem, the buy-in politically is there. But actually implementing is what is a problem. We are past now drafting laws, and what actually the biggest problem, for example, there's one piece in that act called adjustment order, that any building that is frequented by public, whether they are private or public, must be fully accessible. But no one is adhering to that. That's the big problem. Public transport system, for example. You see, if I'm using a matatu, I have to pay for 2 seats or 3 seats because my wheelchair must be parked somewhere. But the danger is, even sometimes they don't even pick you. So it becomes a big problem. In the other parts of the world, if you go, public transport is the best form of transport for my form of disability, for example. But in Kenya, it is the most difficult thing, So I think it has to do, now the laws are there, who is to effect, who is to enforce? Why are we not reining in those who are contravening those laws? That's where we have a problem.
Well, we do and all understand as citizens that the malignant tumor in this country is that we do have brilliant laws, but when it comes to enforcement and operationalization of these laws, it does not happen. That we know it is a sad reality.
Yes.
But then again, having noted what the problem is, how do we go about it to solve it? Because it is our problem. It's not going to go away. And you being one of the people living with disability, you know where it really hurts. So what are some of the efforts that you have made to make sure that, yes, as Kenyans, we never put the laws into practice, but now we need to do? Or do we need to have another dramatic situation whereby maybe one of the politicians gets into a state of inability and then now we can move the wheel forward?
Yeah, Salim, I think the most important, I agree with your sentiment. They say everywhere and every time we read that Kenyans have brilliant minds and we have brilliant papers and policies just gathering dust in certain shelf. For example, people like us who every day face exclusion, discrimination, and stigmatization by virtue of our disability. We're doing our part, raising awareness, working with relevant actors, you know, agitating. Some of us, we are really against compulsive form of advocacy or fighting, but sometimes when need arises and you are pushed so hard to the wall, you have no otherwise. You have to get into the street. You have to litigate. You know, we have to do a lot of other things. But the sad thing is, so longer we continue to define disability from charity perspective, so longer that we don't adopt that disability as part of human diversity, we'll continue to have a big problem in how to engage disabled persons into the, you know, and to meaningfully participate in the society. You know, if a big person in a society, something happened, like you're trying to say, it becomes a blessing in disguise for millions of people around, even not only in Kenya, around the world. America, for example, if you look at the history of America, it's one of the, of course, strongest states in the world right now. But in terms of issue of disability, they are still leading. Why? If you interrogate it and look at it, at one time, one of their former president, FDR Roosevelt, who took through that country during the Great Depression and World War II, was on a wheelchair. Because the president was on a wheelchair, and that time they have not even amended their laws to two terms of 4 years each. He served as a president of USA for 12 years in the comfort of the wheelchair. But because somebody up there, so the state must now run up and down to put issues in place, you know, do safety net programs, build accessibility, I mean, remove barriers and, you know, such kind of a thing. Right now also, before maybe in Ecuador, their president is on a wheelchair. When he was a vice president, I think in a robbery attempt, while he was shopping with his wife, thugs gunned him down. Unfortunately, you know, the bullet touched his spine and he became paralyzed, waist downward, and became a wheelchair user. And then, because he was a politician, he reorganized his thoughts on how to really address the issue of the weaker members of the society. While there are many situations which need to be addressed, he felt this is really the most, you know, segment that is out of the orbit of discussion for a while, and he should have emphasized on it. So that president today is on a wheelchair. Because the president is on a wheelchair, when he became a president, I was reading a report the other day that that government allocated about, you know, $900,000 for disability, you know, handling issue of disability. So he took it 100-fold to $200 million. And today Ecuador is one of the best country for people with disability. And they've also emphasized on how, you know, to encourage disability tourism, people flocking there to learn and, you know, such kind of a thing. So sometimes even the vice president of Argentina, a lady, she's someone on a wheelchair, you know, she's someone with disability. But because they're up there, like you rightfully say, it becomes blessing in disguise for millions down there. So if those guys wouldn't have occupied that office, the issue will be at a periphery for
a long time.
And that's exactly what happened. Perhaps, we're not very sure. But when our former vice president maybe sat on a wheelchair, could be the old Muzee realized that this is real. That's when they started putting ramp in Nyayo Stadium, in Harambee House, in many other places, and that came into place. So
maybe quickly before we take a break, bringing it closer home, could it be a case of we are yet to understand what disability is? Because most of us have the notion that when you're talking about disability, it's only the physical disability. So people with hearing impairment are considered not disabled. People with eyesight impairment, they are considered not disabled. People with mental issues and all that. Do you think that the time is right for us to bring the disability agenda to the mainstream table, where everybody is sitting and say, hello, we now need to talk about disability wholesome as a package?
Exactly. Around the world, Salim, disabled persons are estimated to be 1.3 billion.
Quite a number.
In Kenya, according to World Health Organization report of 2008, it's estimated to be at 6 million. Kenya National Survey put it at 1.33 million. But many disabled persons and the organization refuted the Kenya figure because that time the census was not structured in a way to capture all forms of disability, like you have said. For example, if someone walks in here right now, they know I have a disability because my wheelchair is visible.
Yes.
But there are many forms of disability that are not invisible, which are not captured. So as disabled persons and their organization, we say we are 6 million plus. And different form of disability requires different approach and attention, to freely participate. For example, my form of disability, the barrier much more of, we share attitude together, it's much more of physical. But someone who has an hearing impairment, I have no idea whether this show the sign language interpreter to interpret for maybe a deaf community, for example. There's a barrier, access to communication or information. So, and disability is on rise. Some countries on rise because of conflict, wars, landmine, gunshots. In Kenya, road accident takes a lead, figure. And then depression. World Health Organization reports put depression as one of the leading causes of disability, for example, especially mental issues. Well, mental health.
We shall be taking a break, and tonight we are hosting Brother Harun Maalim, who is also the chairperson of Nondo and an author who writes a lot about persons living with disability. And we are discussing the issue of Muslims living with disability.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Welcome back to Tough Talk, and tonight we are hosting Brother Harun Maalim, who's also the chairperson of Nondo, that is a Northern Nomadic Disability Organization. Brother Harun, before we took a break, we were looking at what would be the best way to bring the disability agenda into the mainstream of society so that everybody can understand that not only persons who live with disability are at risk, but also themselves, that every other human being has a potential of being disabled at one time or another.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brother Salim. We say disability is a free club, and anybody is a potential candidate of joining that club. But we don't wish people really to join because it's one of the most expensive club in terms of living a decent life and the way our societies are organized. Personally, I was not born with disability. My disability is due to road accident. 11 years now. Before then, I have no idea what disability is all about and what it constitutes. But because I found myself into the club, now I can feel from inside the challenges communities with disabilities go through. So, disability, as we've said earlier, it is really on rise. Now, to to make disabled persons, as an integral part of our society, we have to rethink about issues of disability and disability as a sector.
Okay.
Some of us, we are so much engaged in narrative change around matters of disability. I was telling you, the population of disabled persons around the world is 1.3 billion. Look at it from the perspective of market. That's a market huge as China. And according to Global Economics of Disability Survey of 2016, it is estimated that this market controls in disposable income worth $1 trillion. That's huge. In Kenya, 6 million Kenyans, I was telling you, they have disabilities. And 2 million of them, for example, they're using wheelchair like mine. The cheapest wheelchair fabricated here in Kenya cost 20,000 Kenya shilling. So 2 million Kenyans are sitting on a metal worth 40 billion. Look at it from the economic perspective. Now, the industries, the businesses, the employment, transport, warehouse. What if miracle happens and those 2 million people stop using those devices? Certain level of economy will collapse. And all forms of disability uses, are such a market. If you're blind, you require braille services. You require software to translate issues, even images, into an audio for you. If you're deaf, equally. If you have mental, all forms of disability come with. What it means is that disability lifestyle is a very expensive lifestyle, but yet disabled people are the poorest of the poor in our society. So if we have to rethink disability as a sector, as a market, and carry out studies and look at what revenue it generates, the taxes it generates, it's unimaginable. So I think if we address it from that, the way we address gender issues, the way we address youth issues, then we address now the barriers across this person and look at the market and the sector and the value they are to the economy of the country.
Well, I like your thinking about looking at disability as a whole industry, and you're advocating for a change in attitudes. But we do know that as human beings, we have certain entrenched behaviors and values in us, and for you to change them, it's unless we start at a very early stage. What are some of the efforts that you have made to make sure that there's an attitude change amongst the entire society as regards disability?
It's true. So long as attitude is not addressed, we will continue to occupy the lowest of the rung in the economic ladder or in the society. One time, we conducted a day conference in Garissa County, for example. And we were trying to bring out what Islam says about disability. And we brought together top sheikhs from our county in a hotel in Garissa. We asked them whether they have ever raised in khutbah, the most important day, whether they have ever raised what Islam says about disability to the public. Out of nearly 30 sheikhs who came, 9 of them. And we told them, if they're quiet from it, the layman who has his own notion and perception about disability, you have come for him that he is right. Because the thinking in the layman or in many communities, if you have disability, you're either bad omen, you are cursed, it's a punishment, it's a la'anna, So there are these descriptions, So, but if the sheikh wouldn't, if the sheikh would have addressed and bring out strong stories of ashabas with disability, the one that even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded that he has to talk to, you remember the story of, Surah Al-Habasa, how it was revealed, So if a sheikh wouldn't address that, that layman who was crooked thinking toward issues of disability, you have confirmed for him. So stigmatization, labeling will continue. That is a sad reality. I remember we've engaged Jamia Mosque for some times. 2017 and 2016, whether they are accessible as the leading Islamic institution, that is an example to others. How is it? I'm sorry to say, the mosque is inaccessible. Yes, there's some small ramp there. It's quite very steep because you have to use certain gradient. The toilets are inaccessible virtually. Ablution block. I need to sit on it is tough. You get the point. So I think all those things, if we don't, and what we've realized, I told you, when I was coming up here, it is stairs, flight of stairs. And I'm very fat. And so you can imagine people really supporting me to come up.
Yeah,
Stuff.
it's very tough.
This is hard reality that we have to bring out. But what we have noted is, to be very honest, many times it is not that people really wanted to discriminate. It is the level of awareness that is low in people. So if awareness is raised, people will come into reality that yes, come happen in the Ekoshida.
Maybe at this juncture, I would like to know from you, and on a very personal basis, Islam does not give you any, it does not give you any, should I say, what is the right word for this? Excuses that you are a person with disability and then discharge you from any of your responsibilities, either as a husband, either as a father, or either as a member of society. How has it been for you as a person living with disability?
Yeah, you know, the most important thing, if I ask it in a very nice way, you know, I still go back to the attitude. If you see yourself, the attitude should start from you. You correct yourself. If you correct yourself and you have accepted your condition, and you emphasize so much on what you can do, even the society will look at what you are capable of doing.
Yes.
Somehow that time your disability becomes invisible. You know, and participation in a society and, you know, such kind of a thing, you know, it has to do with, I'm trying to remember the question.
Yes, I was asking, how is it for you as a person living with disability, yet Islam has not discharged you from your responsibilities?
Now, the only form of disability that I am discharged from playing my role or worship is mental form of disability. But if I have no mental disability, other forms of disability, I must worship, practice Islam like anybody else. But the problem is, how can I practice that in Islamic community? Access to information if I am deaf. Access to information if I'm blind. Access to mosque to go and listen to sermons and Islamic lectures if I'm using a wheelchair. What is it? So the problem is now how Islamic institutions are built and the way they are organized. That is what makes me somehow lazy from even now going to mosque, and praying and such kind of a thing that you pray on your own. And yet you know how important it is to be participating in congregations.
Yes. Now that you have brought into the limelight Islamic organizations, that is the Masajid and other Islamic organizations, how receptive have they been to the cause of the disabled?
Some, resistive, let me say, but others, they have to involve, issues of cost. Others, they have to take a promise, maybe, take quite a while and things like that. But all those things now, it's not an excuse completely. Provided this is a public institution, you must do something, whether it is from contemporary laws of the country or whether it is obligation as directed by Islam on you, because Islam, if you look at it, is the most inclusive religion. Most of the things that the modern world is practicing is derived from Islam, whether it is even, UN like telling you, times of war, children should not be killed, what. Islam says about it. Just the same it says, even it talks about even inclusion. You've heard of Sahabas who are blind who are leading the mosque. You've heard of Sahabas with physical disability attending to the mosque and such kind of a thing. So the problem is not Islam. The problem is those who are vested with responsibility to lead us. Are they doing it? How many in mosque or where decisions are made, the committees, for example, of institutions, do we have disabled persons within them to articulate issues of disability from within, so that when they roll out their plan, they are all inclusive, And I must say, it's very sadly this one, that disabled persons from some part of this country have gone to school through, other institutions and other well-wishers. And Islamic institutions are locking them out because the facilities are not friendly to them. Yeah. We are surprised to learn, like, one institution in Muslim-dominated county putting in their forms, the child to be admitted here should be physically and mentally fit. Yes, and yet other centers like missionaries, for example, a school in Mandara, yes, there used to be a Father John, a mission center, Mandara Boys Town. Exclusively, they used to admit children with disabilities. The dormitories were built, their playing grounds and what. But the guy left. What has remained of the institutions? If you go to Wajir, there's this Italian nun called Annalena. She came up with a wonderful center. And many disabled persons from that county went through her hand, to access education. Because education is a fighting chance for any child with disability. The more he becomes a doctor, a journalist, an engineer. But his disability is only visible when he don't have an opportunity, in terms of education to be meaningful. If you go to Garissa, many Muslim-dominated counties, the plight of disabled children are not addressed. We have a lot of markas, or Islamic-led institution. If you take an audit of it, it's sad and it's appalling.
In your role as an author, you can clearly see here that we have a situation whereby culture, we have not mentioned all along, could be playing a very big factor as to the attitudes of the people towards persons living with disability.
Yes.
How have you addressed in your role as an author the issue of culture vis-a-vis what the religion requires us?
Yeah, different cultures address disability differently in this country. There are some cultures in this country, if you have a child with disability, you should kill him. Very sad. But in most Muslim communities, their cultures are richly informed by religion, so they don't go that extreme. But to the extreme they go is, provided this person has a disability, your approach should be, now we should take care of. Now, taking care of is kind of for life. And what the danger with that is, it deprives of this person independence to make a decision on his own, on what can touch, I should make a decision on my life, on what I want, where I want to go, whom do I want to associate with, But because now you are denied opportunity in the thinking of you should be taken care of, you just sat there, people have to take care of you, and that's a terrible thing, But and you find many homes, very sadly, kids with disabilities are locked up in houses because people find it taboo, or a bad thing to show, They don't give them the right, I know families who have children as old as 13, 14, 15 years old, they are locked in homes, that people should not see, because they find it bad. And then we've seen homes that are broken up because of children with disabilities. We've seen women being divorced for having children with disabilities. And then if you look at it critically, this is genetic. Maybe it comes from the father's side, Yeah. So you see, it is a very sad, scenario. And then we've seen people with disability who, despite all challenges, have met in life and contributing immensely in our society. And because of that, their disability is hidden. We've also noted disability and gender, how it plays out. Women, because of their gender and her disability, she's double marginalized than men with disability because of cultural thinking that she cannot be a homemaker, she cannot milk a cow, she cannot have a child, she cannot cook, even if she has education sometimes even if she has wealth, But the traditional role of a man is, if you can put the food on the table,
then that's it.
That is, yeah. But your disability is only visible if you cannot put that food on the table, Yeah, so, it matters, from cultures and what. But the bottom line, many cultures like we interact with every day, as I was saying, was richly influenced by Islam. So somehow there is certain level of tolerance, let me say, or inclusion, let me say, and and such kind of a thing. So I think so long as member or at a mosque and scholars don't come out and address issues with disability, we will continue to have negative attitude, and we will continue to stereotype people with disability as not productive members of the society.
Well, we are taking a break, and remember, tonight we are hosting Brother Harun Maalim, who is a person living with disability, and we are discussing the issue of Muslims living with disability. Oh, you're making me learn a lot.
Yeah.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Welcome back to the show, and tonight on Tough Talk we are discussing the issue of Muslims living with disability, and we are hosting our brother Harun Maalim. Brother Harun Maalim, one of the corporates in this country has passionately taken to the issue of persons living with disability, and they've gone ahead, 1 mile ahead of everybody else, and made an edict within their policies that they're going to employ at least 5% of their workforce being persons with disability. What are your thoughts on this kind of effort?
Yeah, that's quite very encouraging, and we must commend many corporate institutions to follow suit. The laws in this country indicate, Brother Salim, that 5% of appointment, whether elective or appointment or employment, should go to persons with disability. But the danger is the way that law is crafted is what is making many disabled people not to access those opportunities. This relevant piece of law says and reads like this: progressive implementation of 5%. So now you can't measure progressive.
You cannot.
You
absolutely.
cannot. So now, under the guise of this, piece of law, that word progressive, the 5% quota cannot be filled, even when we have hundreds of disabled persons with papers and they want employment. The government on its own recently, just ahead of what is called Global Disability Summit they have just attended this week, admitted that they are far way below, even meeting 1% to employment, 1%, leaving the 5%. And then if you go to the litigation and people start talking about it, it is thrown out on the grounds of that word progressive. But many corporate institutions, like we have said, private, have taken deliberate measures to set aside certain quota for disabled persons and employing them on the basis of their qualification, their abilities, and where they can fit in. Many. So I think the most important thing now is to have audit of institutions. Not only audit on their access in terms of built environment, their offices, but in terms of human resource. For example, how many people with disabilities are employed, here or many other institutions? Is it nearing that 5% in any way, or they are nothing? So if we shouldn't now do that kind of an audit and come, bring it out, we will continue to hide under that word progressive. And that's why some of us, we want, the clamor for referendum that is ongoing sometimes. We want it. And our interest is to drop that word progressive. And that word is under the article that is in the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights can only be tampered with in referendum.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think
and with
even
a 2/3 majority.
Exactly. So even the laws, the way they are crafted, no one is talking about it, Yeah. Yet we have some good pieces. For example, now the laws of Kenya are saying, we must have representation in National Assembly. We must have representation in Senate, in county assemblies. We have good representation in both National Assembly and Senate. But at the county assembly, the same law will have applied. A man and a woman with disability must be in the county assembly so that they can look, and address the issue of disability from the perspective of devolution or devolved system of governance. But nearly 20 counties in this country don't have, people with disabilities in their assemblies. Or in other assemblies, they're not well represented. For example, in one county you see, instead of a man and a woman, it's 2 men. In other counties you see only a lady. In other counties you see only 2 ladies, No one talks about it, And then the only way disabled persons, strongly brings out is from political perspective, 6 million people. That's what it means, is 6 million voters. You can imagine if they would have been crammed together into one space, they would have been a county bigger than even Nairobi.
Yes.
And probably if they all vote in the same line as a tribe. And in Kenyan politics, it's more or less of
tribal politics.
Tribal politics. Assume that for the 3rd tribe, which is now disability, voting as a bloc, they can make a huge difference, So the figure is there, and the number is there, but unfortunately what's wrong with this county of 6 million is they are least educated, very poor, marginalized, and underdeveloped. So because of that, they cannot cut a space in democratic processes or what is going on in this country. So then we continue now to trample on them, so that they cannot access opportunity and other important services that the state will have actually provided.
Well, to use your own words, you're talking about the issue whereby if you have a disability and yet you're still able to fend for yourself, if I may use that phrase, you're still able to provide for yourself, you're still able to lead a meaningful life within society, then it tends to mask your disability. Most of the people in society stop seeing you as a disabled person.
Yes.
Yet on the other side, you have another group of persons who are living with disability, and they are always trying to milk out from their disability whatever opportunities that are there. So how do you reconcile these two situations? Because they both contribute to the welfare and the well-being of persons living with disability.
Exactly. There are people who have mastered the art of now using their disability to trade with. It's a fact. And begging, particularly in the streets of major cities in this country. But we have to interrogate why. If you look at people who are begging, even here in Jamia Mosque and many other, just go as an assignment. If we break from here, Maghrib prayer or another, just look. The number of the people with disability who are begging are either 1 or 2 or 3. Many of them are not people with disability. Many of them. But because people with disability, if they beg because of their disability are visible, you tend to explain that almost all disabled persons are beggars.
Yeah.
But then there is also another thinking. If this child, when is growing up, you've denied him an opportunity of education, and he's growing older, and she has needs to meet, she has cost to meet. The only option that's available now to this person later in life, maybe those who are taking care of them die, or they are abandoned, and they have to eat, they have to live. They don't have papers to look for employment. They don't have, they don't have physical strength to go and labor and do stuff because of maybe nature of their disability. What do? The only option that's in that time become available to them is to use their disability to woo sympathy. That's why you find them in the streets, begging. That's why some very bad people using them, especially children with mental disability combined with physical disability in the street, like those that are imported from Tanzania, if had, such kind of a thing. So the most important thing for us, we don't agitate begging. It's not a good thing. The begging can be defined in many contexts.
Yes.
If government begs, it is called donor funding, right? Grants, yes. But if others, it becomes. But generally, so long as we don't address, access to education so that they become meaningful in the society tomorrow, we're going to see people on the streets begging.
Bringing it closer home to the Muslim community, it is said that the lack of data and statistics about persons living with disability has greatly contributed to the situation being as it is today. what efforts have been made by your organization and many other organizations to collect the necessary data so that whenever any intervention measures are to be put forward, then they will be put forward from a point of knowledge and evidence?
Yeah, it's true. I've never had or interacted with any document that say, these are Muslims with disability. But the government, they have conducted a survey. They have conducted even in the census. But we refuted those figures. They put at 1.33 million. And the World Health Organization projected to more than 6 million. You see, carrying out statistics and data is one of the most expensive things. Again, segregating them, analyzing them, in different parameters. For example, sometimes we did a sample baseline survey in Mandera County, for example, and the population of disabled persons in that county stands at more than 30,000. So you can imagine if it would have been detailed scientific data, could be it would be more, and things like that. So I think while certain data collection is a preserving domain, for the state, now that the other census is coming up next year, in August probably, we will have to create a lot of awareness, both to the government and the communities, that we should bring out people to be enumerated so that we know the actual figure. That time we can know, because of the dominance of Islamic Muslim communities in different counties, we can project. In Mombasa, there are how many? In Laumi, there are how many? In Garissa, there are how many? Because of the prevalence and dominance of the faith there, and that's the only way, we can know. But we can always have, a projection, going by, the World Health Organization estimate of 15% of any, population to have a disability. So if, for example, in Garissa, in Taita Taveta, the population is this X, 15% of that is likely to have a disability. So in the devolved system of governance, and evolution is to address now marginalization, injustice, and underdevelopment. But there are people who are really lowest in the community. Do we have specific programs for them? Like the government, one good thing that we commend the government for is they said women, youth, and persons with disability must access, procurement opportunities, contract, 30% youth. But the danger is the way I was telling you about the progressive. This one is not clearly defined. They will have actually clearly segregated. Say out of this 30%, 5% should go to people with disability. 5. They didn't say that. So you can imagine 27 goes to women, 2 go to youth, now like 1% goes to, and that is now like supplying, tissue papers, something that is
nothing substantial.
Yes. So, we have laws, but, provided those laws are not clearly spelled out, we will continue to be marginalized, Look, like in the counties now, we are saying, and we are agreeing, that the best thing that has happened to this country is devolution. That's why now Kenya has been raised as a middle kind of income countries, because devolution is trying to correct so many things. But the same devolution, if it will not address the poorest of the poorest within it, and have a specific program targeting them, we will continue to have issues, and disability issues will continue to remain at periphery. Like, look, the county government, they're not employing disabled persons in their big jobs. The local ministers, chief officers, directors, it has no threshold, So they are already going against the spirit of devolution.
We have not cascaded the laws that we have at national level down to the local levels.
Exactly. Yeah.
What on the ground has it that most of the disabled persons that we do have in our midst are actually not Kenyans? What is your view of this? Because the citizens are talking about, why should we be footing the bill for somebody else? We already have our own burden. Why should we be burdened by other people?
Yeah, I don't know the truth in it, but we've seen reports in the media for quite some time that there are people with disability from neighboring countries like Tanzania, coming to the streets of Nairobi. Of course, Kenya is an economy. It's a rich country compared to our neighbors. Yeah. So people are saying now, why can't we not take the disabled person in the streets of Nairobi and, and Kenyans are kind people, If you see a disabled person in the street, you are touched somehow. You really want to part with the coin, because the plight looks, appeal kind of. So it's true that we have people who are wrecking, which is very wrong, on issues, from the disability of others. Some of the, I think you remember there was a time when the street of Nairobi was cleared of people, and that they are not. We've seen an expo document, of people with disability, being ferried very early in the morning and at the night, such. And most of them are children who cannot speak for themselves. Most of them are either children or adults with mental disability who cannot say no, So so it happens. So I think the state must be vigilant.
As we close, there is a disconnect that many of us have noted, that it's very easy for me as a Muslim, when I'm walking out of the mosque, to drop a penny into the bowl of a disabled person who is seated at the entrance of the mosque. Yet when I'm asked to contribute to an organization, a formal organization that is dealing with issues of persons living with disability, I'm not able to. Where do we get this disconnect?
Yeah, the disconnect, that's really a very good observation. Like we have said earlier, we are yet to see many Islamic institutions expressly addressing issues to do with disability. Those who are addressing are other faith-based institutions. And so longer we don't address that part, allow children with disabilities into Islamic institutions, remove the barriers, give them an opportunity, we will continue to see that. And you see, that form of support is not sustainable. That form of support, you give me 10 shillings, you are just making,
dependent.
Yeah, increasing dependency. And some of us were against, that kind of support, remove this person from the street by offering them an opportunity right from the onset,
As we wrap up our show, Brother Harun Maalim, what are your expectations as a person living with disability upon me as Salim, as a representative of society?
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Brother Salim, and for candidly talking about it. It's our responsibility to be our brother's gatekeeper. It's our responsibility to allow every Muslim to participate in our society freely, regardless of their abilities. I want to really address and use this opportunity that many Islamic institutions are let down if it comes to issues to do with disability mainstreaming. They are contrarily going against the teaching of Islam completely. It's very sad that because of our disability, we cannot access many institutions, whether it is in form of schooling, whether it's in form of employment, or whether it is in form of a worship. So I think it is high time that we wake up and address the issue of disability in that kind of a context. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brother Harun Maalim. Viewers, tonight we have been talking about the issue of Muslims living with disability. And remember, as we have heard, that all of us are potential members to the Club of Disability. We do have a moral responsibility to ensure that persons with disability who are living amongst us are given an opportunity to participate fully in the affairs of society. They're given an opportunity to earn their livelihoods, and also they're given an opportunity to be assisted wherever they need any kind of assistance. Thank
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.